The attacker, in order to carry out his action, will have to measure three factors: interest, difficulty, and risk. This will be called IDR. First of all, interest of the information on a scale of 5 from very low to very high or very strong. Here we can evaluate the usefulness of information as very low when it's not appreciable, as low where it's likely to cross-reference an existing information, as moderate where this information will help in decision making or will provide limited competitive advantage, as strong or high when the information is classified, confidential, and when the information in itself provides a context and a useful response to further action. And we can categorize as very strong or very high any critical information that gives the holder an immediate advantage. The interest also depends on the profile of the person or entity seeking the information. For instance, an individual would like to get the information because he had debts, for revenge, for profit or political ideology. An armed group, activists, they would do it for money or political ideology. A competitor would do it for competitive advantage, for theft of technology or misinformation. An intelligence service would do it for using it as a diplomatic or political tool, as an operational tool for military operations, for instance, as an economic tool to help a state company or state-sponsored company, as a security tool for terrorism actions or hostage operations. And then the local police and local government would use this information to create evidence or misinformation. Once the interest has been defined, the difficulty required to access the information must be evaluated. Again, on a scale of 5 values from very low to very high, and depending on the sensor to be used. For the difficulty, we will have a look at the level of skills, time, and financial resource required to get the information. And we can evaluate this difficulty from very low, where very few skills are required, time and financial resource needed are very low, or low when few skills are required, but only time or financial resource are required, to moderate, where it requires skills, time, and significant financial resource, as high when it requires a lot of skills, a lot of time, and significant financial resources, and very high when you need big expertise, a lot of time, and significant financial resources. Then, depending on the sensor used, for instance, if it is the OSINT sensor, then the difficulty would be from very low to low because it requires a few specific skills and it's relatively short on time. If the human sensor is used, then it would be evaluated from moderate to high because it requires skills and time. Operational sensor would be too strong or high to very strong or very high because it requires very high skills. And multi-sensor approach would be evaluated from high to very high because it requires time and the implementation of complex know-how. Finally, we have to determine the level of risk induced by the operation from very low to very high, again, always depending on the sensor used. For the risk, we identify different categories: diplomatic, reputational, judicial, legal, physical, economic, and financial. We can categorize the risk as very low when only one of these categories is identified whose risk level is very low. Then it's low when one or two are assessed at low. It becomes moderate when one or two categories are assessed with a moderate at most, and high when at least one category with a high risk level or three categories with a moderate risk level. Then we have very high, at least one category with a very high risk level and three categories with a high risk level. Then again, if the OSINT sensor is used, the risk would be very low to low because OSINT let a few traces, there is possibility for anonymization, and there is no direct contact with the target. For the human sensor, it's moderate to very high because it might be legal, reputational, and diplomatic risks associated. For operational sensor, it's quite similar, but high to very high because even if the risks are the same, they are a little bit higher due to the characteristic of operational sensor. And then SIGINT, technical sensor intrusion, computer hacks, it's low to very high because it depends more on the skills needed and the time needed and the difficulty, and the consequences could be reputation and diplomatic. And if we are using all the sensors, that it will be from moderate to very high. From those three values, it is then possible to establish the overall IDR I divided by D plus R score and to be ranking in descending order. So this score minimum is 0.1. So meaning information is very low importance combined with a very high level of difficulty and risk. This is the lowest priority for the company. This does not need to be addressed. Then the max score, 2.5. Highly sensitive information associated with a very low level of difficulty and very low level of risk. This is the absolute priority for the company because this information is very sensitive, easily accessible, and need to be protected. So by performing this equation on the company's own data, the company can therefore evaluate what is of interest from the adversary's point of view and can therefore define an appropriate policy to protect its IT, communications, infrastructure, physical infrastructure, without forgetting the most important thing to train its staff in these different risks. Because let's remember that very often the biggest flaw is human and that continuous awareness and training program is essential. So thank you for having followed this online training and do not hesitate to continue with the module 2 on the protection of the individual. Very interactive module being able to serve as basis to the construction of a program of awareness to the industrial espionage risks. See you soon.